The weight of disbelief. It was the kind of cold that sinks into the bones, that whispers of death in the creaks of an aging house. I stood at the edge of my childhood home, my heart a swelling storm of nostalgia and fury. The familiar sight was a cracked facade of everything I once knew, yet it felt as foreign as the dark, hidden corners of knowledge I had unearthed in my years of obscurity. Years of mockery, laughter, and derision had led me here, back to where it began. "Look who it is!" My brother's voice pierced through the bitter air, laced with disdain. He stood framed in the doorway, his face twisted in that same contemptuous sneer. "Thought you'd be too busy with your little monsters to come home." "Jacob, that's enough," my mother chimed in, her voice trembling with discomfort, but unable to hide the disdain concealed beneath it. "You know he's been through things." "Things?" Jacob barked a laugh, stepping aside to let me in. "Please!" As if his research hasn't been a disaster waiting to happen. "Did you find a parasite that eats your sanity?" I swallowed the lump in my throat, the urge to defend myself fading beneath the weight of too many memories. My family had always seen my passion for parasitic folklore biology as a disease, a sickness that festered in my mind since I was fired from the pest control job. They'd laughed as the allegations of making up unusual skeletal infestations had tarnished my reputation. My desire to dive into the depths of dark folklore had turned into a life sentence of isolation until it became my salvation. "Mom, Dad, you should listen," I whispered, a chill slithering down my spine. Something trembled ominously in the air around us. "I've uncovered things you wouldn't believe. Things that—" "Enough with your nonsense," Jacob snorted, cutting me off. I felt it then, the fraying threads of restraint, the reminder of how my pursuits had once driven a wedge between us. But my resolve was hardened by years in the shadows, by every mocking comment that had become nothing but dark fuel for a fire. "What I found is real," I insisted, stepping further into the dimly lit room that had once felt so safe. "It's out there, and it's coming." The murmur of disbelief echoed through the room, but I pressed on. I had faced what lay beneath the surface, the bone-burrowing parasites that drove men mad, that buried themselves deep into folklore and emerged as horrid truths. I'd survived encounters that would unravel the very fabric of sanity. "Show us," my mother said finally, her voice wavering. It was the slightest glimmer of doubt creeping into her usual stubbornness. "Not here," I replied, knowing that I had to be careful with the dark knowledge I bore. "You have to see it for yourselves, where it began." Jacob rolled his eyes but followed his mother and me into the car. The fields surrounding our home reached out like skeletal fingers, grasping at the fading day as we drove toward the abandoned grounds that had once thrummed with life, now overshadowed by legends of fear. The weight of silence settled heavily between us, full of unsaid words. Arriving at the outskirts of the haunted land, I stepped out into the twilight, the ground still and eerie. "This is where it all started," I whispered, almost reverently. "They said it was just folklore. They were wrong." As if summoned by my certainty, the air around us pulsated, the whispers of wind becoming taunts, snapping through the branches like the brittle remnants of old tales. The fields, once mere idle stories worn thin by disbelief, began to stir. Sinister shadows ebbed and flowed beneath the surface churning, restless, an unsettling acknowledgement of my words. "I don't feel anything," Jacob scoffed, though there was a tremor that betrayed his bravado. "Oh, you will," I hissed, urgency bubbling up as I felt the ground thrum beneath my feet. "You'll wish you hadn't mocked me." Before they could respond, gnashing emerged from the earth, a ripple breaking the surface, and with it, a collective gasp from my family. Something broke free, a writhing mass of skeletal remnants and tainted soil. Each fragment a reminder of how history refracts through folklore. It was the thing I had studied, the thing they had laughed at so harshly. "Behold, Jacob," I breathed, my heart racing. "The truth you've always ridiculed." What rose before us was not merely a grotesque display of the decayed, but an embodiment of lost understanding. With each bone fragment that broke free from the soil, the terror of our past seeped into the present, as if the ghosts of the forgotten were demanding recognition. "Stop it!" Jacob screamed, but his words were swallowed in horror as the shadows grew larger, stretching to consume us. The weight of my family's disbelief bore down upon them, manifesting as a nightmare come to life. As cries filled the air, I felt an odd sense of peace wash over me. I had become the vessel of their reckoning. Surrounded by chaos, I stood taller, knowing I had not just become a scholar of horrors, but a messenger of a truth they had sought to deny. And just like that, as the shadows closed in, they understood. The world didn't merely laugh at my obsession. It would punish those who turned their backs on what lurked beneath the surface. When the silence returned, it echoed with the screams of my family, the realization dawning too late as the horrors I had faced lived on in those who had once mocked me. I stood alone upon the cursed ground, knowing that the transformation had intertwined with my fate. They would forever carry the heavy burden of their disbelief, a reminder that sometimes the greatest horror lies in our refusal to acknowledge the shadows lurking just beneath our feet.